Welcome back, guys. Today I'm going to introduce a new topic, more meta in nature. I want to look at just generally muscle origin, insertion, how we actually need to look at that to improve our training outcomes. So this won't be a video on anatomy. We're not going to get really intense into, naming where origin and insertion are, or even too intense into mechanics. But generally, let's just look at understanding where origin and insertion of muscle are. If we have a basic understanding, that will help us improve our execution of any sort of training, really. So we'll dive into that in a second. But first, if you're not subscribed to my newsletter, please press the link below. Subscribe if you'd like more of me and more training topics and more detail. You'll get more of me there. Getting into this idea first, I want to think about how not all range of motion is going to be created equal. So we're getting a lot of research out that's saying more length is better. And oftentimes, if we do want to grow or put stimulus to a muscle, we do want to lengthen it or load it. So relatively good advice. But just like anything with the internet, we're going to see it taken to the extremes. We're getting into extreme ranges of motion or weird exercise variations that may look good or look cool or look like they're following that idea. But when we look at them more logically, they don't make a lot of sense. So we'll get into a few different categories here: lower body, upper body, and even like some isolation stuff. But first, I want to introduce the idea of just understanding muscle origin, insertion. I don't need to know my pec inserts at the whatever tuberosity of my humerus or even my sternum. I don't even need to know any big names. Generally, I just want to know, okay, bicep, elbow, shoulder, pec, okay, over here, hamstring, okay, crosses the knee joint, attaches the bottom of the pelvis. Generally know what the origin and the insertion are of the muscle, so we understand the orientation that we're pulling. So if we would like to create force or create tension to a muscle, we would like either origin or insertion to remain fixed while we move the other point further or closer to that point, right? So think about like a dog on a leash. If you're pulling on your dog and your dog's pulling away, you're creating a lot of tension, right? If you pull your dog or your dog pulls you, and you let go of the leash, all the tension goes out of the leash, right? So we want to make sure one of those points stay fixed. The other one's trying to move away or closer from a contracting standpoint. That way we're actually going to be getting more tension through the muscle. So now that's kind of laid out. Hopefully that makes sense for you guys. Let's look at some real world examples. So a very common one is going to be the RDL. You'll see a lot of people that are saying actually to get more heel pressure, and very commonly we'll see an execution where the knees are rocking back in space as we hinge. So our hips moving back and our knees are moving back. If we understand the idea of origin and insertion of the hamstrings, now we know that both of those points are moving back in space, right? So if my hips are pushing back in space and my knees are rocking back also, I'm not actually getting more length to my hamstrings, right? So I might feel more of a stretch, and we talk about some mechanical reasons for that. But generally speaking, just because I feel it doesn't mean that I actually mechanically am. Also, I'm doing that at the consequence of getting into a weaker position. So that's kind of where we'll see a fallacy, if you will, with kind of this more length is always better, is sometimes we'll get to a point of so much length that we actually have a pretty significant drop off in loadability. So we want to make sure that we're getting adequate length without compromising a ton of load. So again, even like a dumbbell incline curl, it's more of an isolation example. Let's say that I have, 30, 40 degrees of shoulder extension. If I'm going past that by laying the bench all the way down, it's like, am I actually adding more length to my biceps, or am I going past active range of motion for my biceps and for my ability to get into shoulder extension? And I'm actually going to decrease my ability to load that because of the position that I'm in. So let's look at that. Let's look at, okay, are we moving both origin and insertion, or are we just generally getting into a weaker position where we can't have as high of output? Getting into more of a upper body example now, we'll very commonly see with like chest supported rows, a lot of thoracic flexion and extension. If we understand, okay, traps, rhomboids kind of attached, scapula, T-spine, I would like for my T-spine to stay fixed as my scapula moves around the rib cage and comes back. I don't necessarily want to have origin and insertion of both of those moving, because then I'm not actually going to be improving the amount of tension that I'm putting through those muscles. So again, that was kind of a crash course now that I think about it. But generally speaking, understand origin and insertion, understand where we might want one of those points to remain fixed so we can create more tension through those working muscles. And also understand this general premise of, even though we feel like it's more range of motion, if we're moving one of those points, it may not actually be more range of motion of the muscle, right? Range of motion of the movement is not always range of motion of the muscle. So if there's any takeaway there today, it's going to be that range of motion of the movement does not equal range of motion of the muscle. Let's understand basic origin and insertion and understand the trade-offs in regards to actually moving one of those points or just generally getting into a point or a position that's going to be weaker there. So we'll end it with that. Hopefully that makes sense. If you guys have any follow-up questions to that, I'd love to dive into it in another video. But generally speaking, please take this with you, how you view your training, this is a very important kind of concept to have with how you view your training. So appreciate you guys. As always, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you want to see next.